welcome to a new episode of Melt. I'm Ritvika Gupta. There are still many questions to be answered about experiential marketing in the post-COVID world. Live events suffered last year, but the move to hybrid events seems to offer a way forward. So what are hybrid events and how can they provide brand opportunities for marketers? Anant Rangaswami, editor of Melt, finds out today in a conversation with Fiona Bruder, EVP Client Success at George P. Johnson. GPJ is a leading experience marketing agency that specializes in event and brand marketing. Let's get ready to melt with Fiona Bruder.
Morning, Fiona.
Good morning.
So, Fiona, this is a very difficult year for all marketers and all parts of our ecosystem. But the hardest hit is experiential marketing. So tell me, what do you see as the immediate future of experiential marketing in the world, not just in America, not just in India, wherever experiential marketing exists?
Definitely an understatement. It's been a challenging 10 months. But I think as we emerge, which I think will be kind of our new normal is what we're referring to it now, I think we're going to come back really from a hybrid perspective and having a broader perspective of experiences, right? Not just physical or digital, but really planning for hybrid because we're not going to come back consistently. So for marketers that have global experience, what's happening in the US versus India versus London is going to keep varying in the next few months. So I think we have to really prepare ourselves for hybrid experiences so that we can ebb and flow in the planning perspective.
Right. So when you say hybrid, just explain to me, how will a conference work?
Sure.
GPJ does a lot of conferences. So tell me how the conference will work.
Sure. I think people have probably believed that they had been doing hybrid, but normally what was happening is you'd have a physical event and then post the physical event, you'd plan for something digital as an extension. And true hybrid is you're planning for a remote audience and a physical audience simultaneously. So you can really address the needs of your audience. Those that can attend in person and want to be able to do that can, and those that can join digitally can enable you to have global reach, to reach different audiences, time zones, and those sort of things. But the uniqueness about hybrid is it's really planning remote and physical attendees at the exact same time. And it's curated that way.
How do the metrics change? The way the marketer evaluated whether his or her investment was give you a good ROI in a physical world seemed to be simple. Tell me, how do they measure the ROI now?
In our digital experiences, we were measuring retention, longevity, click-throughs, traditional digital metrics, right? How long people engage. But the lead cycle was longer because, as you say, you don't get married after the first date, right? In a digital event, you need that physical component to bring the experience a little bit deeper. So I think what we have found is that the metrics are really focusing on content quality, production value, right? Because what we saw when in March and April, a lot of companies went out quick and executed digital tactics. And a lot of them didn't perform because they were focusing on getting out into market and not really focusing on the quality of the content, the production value, and creating something really unique. And I think that's even more now as people are suffering from digital fatigue and other things. You have to create really engaging experiences that they can't get anywhere else. And I think that's the nuance we're starting to see 10 months in. We have to have these experiences work harder for us.
So a couple of months ago, I interviewed one of your clients, which is IBM.
Yeah.
I was talking to Dipali, and Dipali was saying that the thing she misses most about the physical event is the ability to do unplanned networking.
Yes.
So how do digital events allow for little nuances like that?
Yeah, unfortunately, you can't completely recreate that, right? I mean, I love that comment that she made that because it's truly one of the values of a face-to-face event. You can connect to people. I think what we're starting to see is the digital tactics doing a better job pre-event, understanding people's profile, their area of interest, and creating smaller, unique experiences within the experience versus everyone just kind of one to many, one to few. And I think we're starting to see more of that, but it requires getting a lot more insight in the planning and the registration phase, right? So you know how to connect like-minded people.
Right. Now, you look at the large conferences and festivals and so on, take Cannes or South by Southwest or places like that. They're all struggling because the moment you go digital, your revenue drops like a bomb, yeah. So how do you think they will navigate that? Because the cost is arguably much lower, obviously, because you don't have,
Right.
space cost and so on. But
I,
how do these businesses survive?
well, I think they have to take that broader perspective of what experiential is. And at George B. Johnson, for us, we've always thought about experiential as physical, digital, and hybrid. And I think those that are surviving are the ones that were able to shift quickly to digital at this point in time. And then as things start emerging, they can shift into hybrid. So you sort of have to plan to meet your attendees or your clients where they are. And I think physical events are going to come back. Obviously, you talked about that, need for connectivity, because you can't recreate that at that same level. So I do believe really strongly that the events are going to come back from a physical perspective, but how quickly, how large they are, how long they are. I think a lot of the traditional attributes that we had in physical events will start changing.
Right. And what about the entertainment or sports kind of events, which, a lot of them are very big IPs and they rely hugely on attendance for revenue. How does that pan out, especially in the US? You've opened football and baseball in a few places.
Yeah, it's inconsistent, and it's we've opened it, but with smaller crowds. And I think that we're going to have to see that over time build. We're going to see smaller groups as people get comfortable with them, as vaccinations get distributed, right? We started that here in the US, in other markets as well. Once I think that gets more established, people will be comfortable. But we've done a lot of research. People will come back. I hate to say it, but even after September 11th, we didn't think in the US people would quickly get back on planes. They did, because that desire and that need to have that human connectivity is actually that strong. But I think it's going to be a slow build as people feel safer and start planning. I think some of the trips might be shortened. There was days that people would go, 6-7 days at an auto show or a conference or a trade show. And I think sometimes you're going to have to plan for people coming in and out, right? Because I think people's lives have been so blended, right? Their personal and their professional lives in the last 10 or 11 months.
Right. Large organizations like yours have seen the shift to digital anyway, with or without the pandemic. But how much has the pandemic contributed to change in your recommendations to your clients and your clients' absorption of those recommendations?
So as I said, we always have thought ourselves as experiential, right? Because we feel like depending on the audience and the need, you choose if it's physical, digital, or hybrid. This certainly speeded up that train very quickly for us. We were able to shift really quickly because we've been planning that way. And I think the nice thing is our clients have been planning that with us as well. I think people had to test things, right, with their audiences, but we saw a really, really quick shift into digital. In India, we produced 150 virtual events in 9 months. In the United States, we produced 700, right? So they're huge numbers. And some of them are smaller, really targeted things. And some of them are for tens and thousands of people. And I think that's the scale that we're seeing. And I think people have been practicing as they've gone through the last few months and creating better experiences. I think the shift for us has really been focusing on finding balance between digital, but creating a physical component, right? So we're seeing a lot of our clients creating things, and they send something to the attendee so that there's a physical, like emotional connection to them as they join the digital experience. And that seems to be working quite well.
To your mind, in the last, out of these 900 events or 700 you've done in the US or 150 in India, can you share with us one event which is a perfect example of the new kind of event? Without naming the client, you needn't name the client if you don't want to.
Sure.
If you carry us through, tell me what happened to the invitee or the delegate to that event, what he or she experienced.
So I think I'll focus on some of the small ones because we do a lot of really large events and we're known for that. But I think some of the most successful things have been some of the really small targeted things. One of the things that we've seen that's been so successful in these digital events has been access. Right? Historically, if you're at a large event, you want to go meet with the CEO or the CMO or a celebrity guest that's there, that's very rare. But when you're in a digital environment, we can bring those experiences. So we've had great success in bringing music and theater and special guests and expertise in different ways to our attendees. And it's very one-on-one, like we're talking now. And they've had that opportunity that you wouldn't get in a physical event. So as much as there's been a lot of cons, there's a lot of pros as well in creating access to content and to individuals that people historically might not have received. So for me, some of the smaller programs that we've seen and we've executed have been around that, right? That access. And I think that's going to be one of the opportunities and or challenges as we come back to physical. How do we continue that? When a salesperson can make sure that the CEO is in attendance in talking to their client, where it might have been harder to do that in a physical event because of time and space.
So tell me the skill sets that you have at George P. Johnson. Let's say, what are the changes that have been, that you see caused by the pandemic in skill sets of your own team members?
Sure. It's a great question. I think there's probably three areas that we've invested. One is digital. We've had digital resources. We've invested more heavily on the technical side of that. The second one is broadcast, right? As I said earlier, the challenges we saw very early on was quality, the broadcast quality, the production value. That's where we saw a lot of gaps. So we've invested very heavily in our broadcast and live production capabilities. And the third one is content. It's such a cliche, but it's still so true that content is king, and never more so when people have access to everything, right? So the content has to be so compelling. So we've really invested in those three areas. And the last one being in content strategists to partner with our clients to really think about the narrative and the story. Storytelling, I think, has emerged in such a great way in experiential in this time. And those are probably our three most important areas in the last year.
So when you say broadcast, can you just take me through step by step what you mean by your
Sure. So making sure that we have specialists in broadcast and a platform that clients can engage with, right? So when you have a CEO or a VP of sales, that you have a specialist that's working with them, making sure they have the right bandwidth, making sure that there's film production value behind them in terms of those capabilities. So it's like leveraging the production and merging with the broadcast. So it's very seamless, right? Because the quality has to be like TV show quality. And that's what people are demanding in high level client engagements and experiences now. It's like that kind of broadcast quality. So that's been an area that we've invested heavily internally and then with our partners. So we have an ecosystem of partners as a global agency that we work with to deliver.
The last 10 months, we've seen, at least from an Indian perspective, we've seen a lot of people dabbling with these, shall we say, virtual events. Mm-hmm. And the one of the challenges that not everybody, large numbers seem to have is the retention. Yes. What seemed to be on ground, half an hour seemed to be a good slot, but in a virtual world, perhaps the fatigue sets in after about 10, 15 minutes. So is that your experience as well? And is there a magic formula to content size or session size?
Yeah, I think brevity, right? Simplicity, ease of use are probably the most important things when you're in a digital experience. But I do think the format is so important, more so than in the physical space where you can see your audience if they're with you or if you're losing them. So we've seen a lot of different types of formats, a lot more kind of one-on-one dialogue like we're having now, and those access to experts. But the format is definitely shorter and it's really clear and navigable, meaning there's some things that are live and people can have to join at a point in time. And we're working with a lot of on-demand content that's pre-recorded that people can come and go at their leisure, right? I think one of the key things for us that a lot of people in this business have learned is you have to create an experience based on the user's need, not on what we're trying to say. And that's been a big shift. I think with many clients and people in experiential in general, we have to give them the journey and they have to be able to choose it at their leisure.
So is there a change in the role of companies such as yours? If you turn the clock back 10 years, the role of the experiential marketing agency was more execution. You made the event look good and so on.
Yeah.
But today, I think it's shifted. You've got to advise your clients on what they should be doing in the content side.
Yes, it's much more on the strategy, the experience design, like how do you take the content and have the experience deliver it in the best format. So we spend a lot of time talking to our clients. If this is your story and the narrative, what's the best medium to deliver that, right? Is it one to many? Is it a breakout session? Those sort of things. That's been a huge shift, right? That strategic focus and linking it to the experience design.
So is there a change in the skill sets that you've brought on board, even on the content side?
For sure. We've had to bring in new types of strategists. We've always done a lot of program strategy for our clients, helping them decide which types of events to go to, more like portfolio planning. But the strategy now is much more around where and placement of speakers and how the content should be curated. The curation piece is probably the biggest shift that we've seen in our business, really taking a partnership role with our clients and managing that.
So let's take your job and say, if you can share with my viewers how your job has changed. Imagine you describe your job as on, January 20th, 2020, and then again we jump to January 20th, 2021. How has your job changed? You're traveling a lot less, but
yes,
I would argue perhaps you have a lot more meetings with your clients. So if you can tell us.
I love that question. I, as a person who's probably traveled my whole life, my whole career, 30 plus years, and extensively, probably 50-60% of my time was traveling. I miss that direct engagement, but the time that we're spending with our clients is much deeper. We're really thinking ahead instead of just a lot of times planning for the immediate. We're planning for the next step and contingency planning in a different way, right? Because the world keeps changing. We've seen a lot of the second wave of the virus coming in. We were starting to execute physical events in different parts around the world. So I think the need to be flexible and not get so fixated on things, right? Getting technology to work for us versus us working for the technology. There's been a lot of shifts like that we're starting to see. So my job, honestly, is all about planning and strategic thinking with the clients and really talking about what's next and looking at the trends. So we do a lot of trends reports and points of view for our client. And the last one we just talked about was really thinking about the relationship between space and time and people and technology, right? Those are the four things that are really important to us. And they've completely changed, right? People might not want to get back on a plane. People might not want to spend a week somewhere. And the technology has evolved. So we have to think about those four things and how they impact the experiences we're creating. And we spend a lot of time talking to our clients. And they're eager. They're really engaged to try different things and really show up in unique ways for their audiences.
So can you expand on those four elements, four pillars, and tell us how each has changed?
So space, right? We used to be in physical spaces. Now we're in digital spaces, but even those in 10 months, right? If you think about how people came out originally, there was a lot of digital events and people were the market was oversaturated. So now we're thinking about unique spaces for smaller audiences, like I talked about before. Time is the format thing, or on demand. People need to be able to engage in something at their moment of need. And I think that's the word I like to use a lot, moment of need. And when you're in digital and online, that changes. Also, people. We're talking to people at our home with their families. So one of the things that we've done, and we've seen a lot of our clients doing, is creating experiences when someone is sitting there and has their children at home with them. So a lot of our clients were creating packages so that there's something for the children to do when you want to keep somebody else engaged, those sort of things. And then I think technology is probably the other biggest shift that we've seen. The number of virtual event providers that have come up, the number of clients that are looking at their overall platform and finding an always on solution that they can create an experience that people can come back to time and time again. So those four are going to continue to evolve, and we have to stay ahead of that. And frankly, for me, always linking it to what you started with, which is really about human engagement, right? The reason events have stood the test of time is because as human beings, we crave connectivity. And that's never going to change. So events will come back physical, but in the same time, you have to think about these other elements, the technology and how they support that.
We've used the word experiential many, many times. And, you turn the clock back 20 years, 30 years, people would love attending a launch of a new car or go to Basel for a watch conference and so on and so forth. How do you replicate that experience of richness and grandeur and scale and size digitally? Is that ever going to be happen that you can really make you feel like that, or is it a trade-off somewhere?
I think there's always trade-offs, and I think there's trade-offs in some physical events as well. We do a lot of events in the auto industry, and we do many of the auto shows all around the world, and in particular in the US. And we're partnering with all of our auto clients, talking about, as the auto shows have been canceled, or postponed really, what do we do between now and then? How do we engage? The end goal is to get a customer into a car, but there's huge digital experiences that we've given to them that they can kind of immerse themselves into the car, see all the different elements of it, and explore, right? Which is what the exploration piece you can do beautifully on digital and go deeper. And then when we come back into physical, they'll be able to get into a car and smell it, right? Like those senses that you need, all the senses come to life in a physical event. And I think that's probably the biggest shift. We'll see some very interesting things coming out in the auto space. I think in this hybrid opportunity that I talked about, auto will be very interesting to watch. There's going to be some really interesting experiences.
Yeah. So auto is one. The other one I was thinking of was beverages, especially alcohol. What happens, because the reason for all these events to exist was I could sample the alcohol.
Yes.
Now, you launch it. So what happens now in a digital world?
That's why, remember I mentioned earlier that people sending packages to their clients. We've seen a ton of that. We've had cooking, like the famous chefs on that are joining into these sessions, and you send those personalized packages that make people feel a little bit more connected, but you can't replace taste and smell and the sensory thing. And the other part for me about an event experience is energy, right? There's something, if you're at a concert, it doesn't even have to be a business event, right? A concert, you mentioned festivals, there's energy. You can sense that, that connectivity with people and energy. And that's probably the hardest thing to replace, which is why you have to think about incorporating some physical elements if you can, and making it much more unique and personalized, like with access to other types of individuals, because the energy is probably the hardest thing to replace when you're doing something digitally.
Right. So what happens? A few days ago, the Cannes Festival announced that they are going ahead with the 2021 festival, which, I thought they were nuts, and I said so on Twitter. So what's your view on that? What will happen to Cannes 2021?
So look, I think that I'm not surprised, and I think everyone's waiting for the first person to be first, right? Like in terms of how that we come back. But the announcement is because they're probably done a lot of research with their attendees. People are craving. They want to come back into physical environments. I think it'll be different, like safety. We have done a ton of work on health and safety. There was an auto show in December in the United States, in Florida. Physical events. People went to it. And we partnered with the show producer to create health and safety protocols. Everything from wiping things down, social distancing. There's really comprehensive ways, because we have to make sure people feel safe. So for me, the first aspect of that will be health and safety, communicating that and understanding it so people truly feel safe in that environment. And I think that's here to stay, right? That need for focusing much more on health and safety based on what everyone's experienced in the last year.
Yeah, but a physical event like Cannes, almost all the success lies in proximity and hanging together and hugging each other and having a drink together and so on.
Yeah.
So how
it'll be smaller. I think it would have to be smaller and smaller groups. And it's going to be much, the invitation piece, I think, will be more challenging than it has been even in the past. And I think it'll be scale. I think we're going to have to scale back in to those physical events, because people need to feel safe. And you have to plan for both, right? What if there's a shift or something changes? Right? You have to actually plan for both, so that you have a contingency plan if something happens that you can't continue with the physical component.
Sure. And the last question, tell me what your focus is going to be for the next couple of months. If you had to distill it, and you had an interview with your boss right now and said, okay, tell me in one sentence what you're going to focus on in the next 3 months, what would you say?
So we're going to be really focused on hybrid and really planning for emergence and thinking about physical and digital and planning for both. That way, if there's a shift, right, you can pull a lever and you can be more physical or you can be more digital. So the biggest priority for me right now is partnering with our clients, because we don't know when we're going to be able to open up. And it's going to be in the United States with 50 states. It's different in every state because the status is really different. So I think our biggest focus is really going to be on hybrid. And I think simplicity, as I said earlier, more with less, right? It's okay to have less things and do them exceptionally well. Most of our clients, be it IBM and Google and all the big IT companies that we partner with, they're all focusing on doing more with less and creating more unique experiences for their audiences and prioritizing. And so we're focusing on strategically partnering with them to bring those to life. And I think for us, it's making sure that we have the right skill set to do so. And we feel really strongly that we do, and we have invested in the right areas so that we can handle this shift as we come back into the physical environment.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Fiona. There's been an absolutely lovely morning for us over here. I hope our viewers love it too. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the time.
And that was Fiona Bruder sharing what experiential marketers need to know about the future of events. Now here's presenting the Melt cheat sheet. Hybrid events are physical events that are at the same time extended digitally for a remote audience. While digital allows access, nothing can replace the energy of a physical event. Space, time, technology, and people are the 4 key elements that impact experiences today. With that, it's a wrap on this episode of Melt. Do follow us on social media. Our handle is Ready to Melt, and stay updated with all that's happening in the world of advertising and marketing with our daily Melt updates on our website readytomelt.com. I shall see you next week. Goodbye.